I am Thomas Brennan. I'm 64 years old, and last Monday, I watched 6 men in dark suits carry my younger brother's casket out of St. Joseph's Cathedral in Boston. The organ was still playing when my nephew Jake appeared at my elbow, his cologne so strong it cut through the incense. He leaned close, his breath hot against my ear, and whispered, "Uncle Tom, you've got 72 hours to sign over the restaurants. After that, I'm filing a lawsuit that'll destroy you." He smiled, not the sad smile you'd expect at a funeral. No, this was the smile of someone who'd been waiting for this moment, planning for it. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't break. I simply turned to look at him, this 39-year-old man in his $1,000 suit, and I said, "All right, Jake, Thursday at noon, your lawyer's office." His smile faltered. Just for a second, he'd expected tears. He'd expected me to beg, to remind him that I'd known him since the day he was born, that I'd paid for his college when his father, my brother Michael, was too proud to ask for help. Instead, I gave him nothing but a quiet nod and walked away from my brother's grave. I could feel Jake's eyes on my back as I got into my old Honda Civic. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing there with his pregnant wife Amanda, both of them looking confused. They thought they'd just won the lottery. Brennan's Restaurant Group, 5 locations across Boston, net worth somewhere north of $8 million. They had no idea what was coming. But before I tell you exactly how I dismantled his lies and uncovered something far worse than greed, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe that patience always defeats arrogance, please like and subscribe to this channel. My brother Michael was 58 years old. For the past 3 years, he'd been fighting what the doctors called early onset Alzheimer's. It started small, forgotten names, misplaced keys. But 6 months ago, he deteriorated rapidly. He couldn't remember how to make the tomato sauce recipe our mother had taught us in her kitchen in Southie. He'd get lost driving to restaurants he'd worked at for 30 years. Then, 3 weeks ago, he collapsed in his apartment. Stroke, the doctor said. Massive. He died before the ambulance arrived. I believed it. Michael had been under so much stress. The illness, the confusion. His son Jake constantly pushing him to retire, to let the younger generation take over. It made sense. What I didn't see coming was Jake at the funeral, confident and ready, like he'd been preparing a speech. During the reception at our flagship restaurant on Newbury Street, the place Michael and I had opened together in 1992, Jake moved through the crowd like he owned it. He shook hands with our suppliers, promised our head chef Maria that everything would continue as normal, accepted condolences with practiced humility. I watched him. 35 years in the restaurant business teaches you to read people. You learn to spot the customers who will walk out on their bill, the employees who steal from the register, the vendors who water down their products. Jake's grief looked rehearsed. Every few minutes, he'd check his phone, typing quickly, then looking toward the door like he was expecting someone important. After the last guest left, after Maria and her team had cleaned up and gone home, Jake cornered me in the upstairs office. The same office where Michael and I used to count the night's receipts, where we'd celebrated our first profitable year, where we'd toasted with cheap whiskey when we opened our second location. "Tom," Jake said. "Not Uncle Tom anymore." He hadn't called me that in almost a year. "We need to discuss the business situation." "Business situation," I repeated, my voice rough from a day of forced conversations and hollow condolences. He placed a leather portfolio on the desk. Inside were documents, lots of them, all flagged with yellow tabs. Dad signed these 6 months ago when his mind was still somewhat clear. Power of attorney. He wanted me to handle all business decisions. You know how confused he'd gotten. I looked at the papers. I saw my brother's signature at the bottom of each page, but something felt wrong. Michael's handwriting had always been terrible, a doctor's scrawl that only he could read. But these signatures were too neat, too controlled, practiced. "Michael never mentioned this to me," I said quietly. Jake's jaw tightened. "Uncle Tom, let's be honest. Dad didn't trust your judgment anymore. You're stuck in the past. You refuse to modernize. You wouldn't let us expand into delivery apps, wouldn't update the menus, Wouldn't even consider selling to one of the restaurant groups that's been calling for years. I'd received offers. One from a corporate chain offering $12 million for the whole operation. Michael and I had laughed about it over beers. We're not selling our mother's recipes to some corporation that'll turn them into frozen meals, he'd said. The truth is, Jake continued, leaning back in the leather chair that used to be Michael's, Dad left me in charge. These documents are legal and binding. You own 30%, I own 70%, and I'm making some changes. First, we're hiring a consulting firm to audit everything. Second, we're bringing in new management. Third, you're stepping down as operating partner. 30%. Michael and I had always been 50-50 partners. We'd split everything down the middle for 32 years. You have 72 hours to sign the transition documents, Jake said, sliding another paper across the desk. If you don't, my lawyer will file suit for breach of fiduciary duty, mismanagement, and embezzlement. We've already found some discrepancies in the books. Large cash withdrawals, unexplained expenses, embezzlement. The word hit like a slap. I'd never stolen a penny. Every cash withdrawal was documented, legitimate, payments to day laborers, tips for suppliers. The kind of under-the-table transactions that kept a restaurant running in a city like Boston. I'll need to speak with my attorney, I said, keeping my voice level. Jake stood, buttoning his suit jacket. You do that. But Tom, think carefully. You're 64 years old. Do you really want to spend your retirement in court? Or worse? He let the threat hang in the air. Sign the papers. Take your 30% and enjoy your golden years. Fight me, and I'll make sure you end up with nothing. He walked out. I heard his BMW start in the parking lot, heard the expensive engine purr as he drove away. I sat alone in the office, surrounded by photographs of Michael and me through the decades. Opening day, 1992. Our parents cutting the ribbon, Michael grinning with tomato sauce on his apron. Us with our arms around each other's shoulders, brothers who'd built something real together. I waited until the building was completely silent. Then I opened the bottom drawer of the desk, the one I kept locked, and pulled out a business card I'd been saving for 3 months. A card that a former customer, a woman who'd eaten at our restaurant every Friday night for 5 years, had left for me after her last visit. Catherine O'Brien, attorney at law, corporate litigation and fraud investigation. I picked up my phone and dialed. Her secretary answered on the second ring. O'Brien and Associates. This is Thomas Brennan. Catherine told me to call if I ever needed help. I need help. The secretary's voice warmed immediately. Mr. Brennan, Miss O'Brien has been expecting your call. She asked me to tell you that she's cleared her schedule. Can you come to her office tomorrow morning at 8? 8 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting in Catherine O'Brien's corner office overlooking Boston Harbor. She was a woman in her 50s. Sharp eyes behind designer glasses, the kind of lawyer who made opposing counsel nervous just by walking into a courtroom. We'd talked many times over her Friday night dinners, always about food, about family, about Boston's changing restaurant scene. I'd never asked what kind of law she practiced. Now I knew. She poured coffee from a French press. The real stuff, dark and strong. Tom, I'm sorry about Michael. He was a good man. Thank you, I said. Tell me everything, I told her. The signatures, the power of attorney, Jake's threats, the embezzlement accusations. Catherine took notes, her pen moving quickly across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. The signature on those power of attorney documents. You said it looked wrong? Too neat. Michael's handwriting was awful. These looked traced. Catherine pulled out her phone and made a call. Daniel, I need you in my office. Bring your forensic kit. She hung up and looked at me. Tom, do you have copies of those documents? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken with trembling hands the night before. Catherine's eyes narrowed as she examined them. 5 minutes later, a young man in his 30s entered the office carrying a laptop and a small case. Catherine introduced him as Daniel Chen, forensic document examiner. Daniel, look at these signatures. Compare them to these. She pulled out a file folder. Inside were documents I recognized. Lease agreements, vendor contracts, all signed by Michael over the years. Daniel set up his laptop, uploaded my photos, and began comparing them side by side. He zoomed in, analyzed pen pressure, examined the flow of ink. After 10 minutes, he looked up. These power of attorney signatures are forgeries. See how the pen pressure is uniform throughout? That's consistent with tracing. And look here. He pointed at the screen. The tremor that was developing in Michael Brennan's later signatures, consistent with his neurological condition, is completely absent in these documents. Someone traced these from older signatures, probably from documents that predate his illness. Catherine smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who'd just found the weak point in an opponent's armor. Tom, those documents Jake showed you are worthless. But that's not the interesting part. What do you mean? Jake doesn't actually know what he's trying to steal. She pulled out another file, this one much thicker. Do you remember when Michael set up the corporation? When you two decided to protect yourselves from lawsuits? I nodded. That was 1998, after a customer tried to sue us for a slip and fall. Our lawyer had recommended incorporating, setting up an LLC. Your lawyer at the time was very smart, Catherine said. He didn't just set up an LLC. He set up a series of holding companies and a family trust. Brennan's restaurant group isn't owned by you and Michael. It's owned by the Brennan Family Trust. And the trust is controlled by a board of 3 trustees. I felt my confusion must have shown on my face because Catherine continued. You, Michael, and your mother Agnes. Do you remember signing those papers? I did, vaguely. It had seemed like legal boilerplate at the time. Your mother is still alive, Tom. Still living in that assisted care facility in Quincy. Still legally competent. And according to the trust documents, no major decisions can be made without unanimous consent of all 3 trustees. Michael's death doesn't change that. His trustee position passes to his estate, which means it goes into probate. Jake doesn't automatically inherit anything. So he can't sell the restaurants. He can't fire me. He can't do anything without my mother's consent. Exactly. And there's more. Catherine pulled out another document. The trust also owns the real estate. The building on Newbury Street? You and Michael didn't just lease it. You bought it in 2003. It's worth about $4 million now. The building in Cambridge, where your second location is? Another $3 million. Jake thinks he's stealing a restaurant business. He has no idea he's trying to steal a real estate empire. I sat back, feeling like I could breathe for the first time in 2 days. So we go to court, prove the signatures are forged, and Jake walks away with nothing. Catherine's expression darkened. Tom, if Jake is willing to forge legal documents, willing to threaten you with false embezzlement charges, what else might he have done? What are you suggesting? Michael's rapid deterioration over the past 6 months. The sudden stroke. Have you ever asked yourself if it was really natural? The room felt cold. My little brother, who I'd protected from bullies in elementary school, who I'd taught to cook, who'd been my best friend for 58 years. The medical examiner ruled it a stroke, I said, but my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Medical examiners make preliminary rulings based on obvious evidence. But Tom, Michael was 58, relatively healthy despite the Alzheimer's. He'd had a full physical 6 months ago. Clean bill of health, except for the cognitive issues. And then he rapidly gets worse and dies of a massive stroke. Catherine leaned forward. I have a friend at the DA's office. If you're willing, I can make a call. Request a full toxicology analysis. Ask some questions that maybe should have been asked the first time. Do it, I said. The words came out harder than I intended. If Jake did something to Michael, if he hurt my brother, I want to know. Catherine made the call. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went to the restaurants, kept up appearances. Jake showed up at the Newbury Street location on Wednesday, strutting around like he owned the place, telling the staff about the exciting changes coming. He introduced his wife Amanda, 6 months pregnant, as the new director of operations. Amanda was 35, pretty in an Instagram-filtered way, always checking her phone. She'd been a pharmaceutical sales rep when she met Jake. Now she was apparently qualified to run a restaurant empire. We're going to modernize everything, Amanda announced to Maria, our head chef who'd been with us for 15 years. Update the menu. Bring in some molecular gastronomy elements, maybe some fusion concepts. Maria, a 62-year-old woman from Sicily who'd learned to cook from her grandmother, just stared at Amanda like she'd suggested setting the kitchen on fire. On Thursday at 11:30, Jake called. Uncle Tom, my lawyer's office. Noon. Don't be late. I'm already here, I lied. I'll see you soon. I wasn't at his lawyer's office. I was sitting in Catherine O'Brien's conference room with her, Daniel Chen, 2 investigators from the DA's office, and a detective from the Boston Police Department. At 12:05, Jake called again. Where are you? Come to Catherine O'Brien's office, I said. 61 Congress Street, Suite 1400. What? Uncle Tom, we had an agreement. My lawyer's office. Plans changed, Jake. Come alone or don't come at all. He arrived at 12:30, Amanda in tow. His confident smile faded when he saw the conference room full of people. The smile disappeared completely when the detective stood up and introduced himself. Mr. Brennan, I'm Detective Martin Reeves, Boston Police Department. We have some questions regarding your father's death. Jake's face went pale. I don't understand. Dad had a stroke. The medical examiner already ruled on it. Yes. Well, we've requested a more thorough examination, Catherine said, and we've been looking into some financial irregularities at Brennan's restaurant group, including these power of attorney documents you've been using to claim ownership. She slid copies across the table. Daniel Chen followed with his forensic analysis, pointing out the forged signatures with the clinical precision of an expert witness. These documents are fraudulent, Mr. Brennan, which means every decision you've made claiming authority under them is void. The question is, who forged these signatures? Jake looked at Amanda. Amanda looked at her phone. I want a lawyer, Jake said. That's your right, Detective Reeves said. But before you go, you should know that the toxicology results came back this morning. Your father had elevated levels of succinylcholine in his system. It's a paralytic drug, commonly used in medical settings. In large doses, it can cause respiratory failure that mimics a stroke, very hard to detect unless you're specifically looking for it. He paused. Your wife worked in pharmaceutical sales. She had access to medical supplies. She also had a key to your father's apartment. Several neighbors reported seeing her there multiple times in the weeks before his death. Amanda stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. I didn't do anything. This is crazy. Jake, tell them. But Jake wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the table, his face a mask of crumbling denial. We also pulled your text messages, one of the DA investigators said. The ones between you and Amanda. The ones where you discussed how much longer your father would last. Where Amanda complained about the weight. Where you calculated inheritance values. And the particularly interesting message, Catherine added, where Amanda asked if you thought the medicine she'd been putting in his morning smoothies was working fast enough. The medicine, succinylcholine, administered gradually over weeks, could cause the exact symptoms Michael had shown. Confusion, weakness, the rapid deterioration his doctors had attributed to Alzheimer's progression. Jake finally looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my nephew's eyes. Panic. We didn't mean for him to die, he whispered. We just wanted him to be more confused, so the power of attorney would seem legitimate, so people would believe he'd signed it. Amanda said the dose was safe. Amanda was crying now, mascara running down her carefully made-up face. He was dying anyway, the Alzheimer's. We were just speeding up the inevitable, and we needed the money. Jake's been gambling. We owe people, dangerous people. Detective Reeves was already reading them their rights. 2 uniformed officers appeared from the hallway. I watched as they put handcuffs on Jake, on Amanda, on my nephew, who I'd held as a baby, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd killed his own father for restaurants. He couldn't even legally inherit. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented the forensic evidence, the forged documents, the text messages that showed months of planning. They brought in neighbors who'd seen Amanda entering Michael's apartment, carrying smoothies from our restaurant, telling people she was checking on her father-in-law. They presented testimony from a pharmaceutical company whistleblower who confirmed that Amanda had been ordering succinylcholine, claiming it was for her sales demonstrations. Jake's defense tried to blame everything on Amanda. He claimed he didn't know about the drug, didn't understand what she was doing. But the text messages showed otherwise. Messages where he encouraged her, where he asked if the plan was working, where he calculated how long until they could take control. Amanda's defense tried to claim Jake had manipulated her, that she was a victim of his gambling debts, his pressure. But the jury saw through it. They saw two people who'd decided that Michael's life was worth less than their ambition. The verdict came on a cold afternoon in March. Guilty, both of them. First-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud. Jake got life without parole. Amanda got 25 to life. She'd deliver her baby in prison. That baby, my grandnephew or niece, would grow up knowing their parents were murderers. I sat in the courtroom gallery, feeling nothing but an empty space where my brother used to be, where my nephew used to be. Justice had been served, but Michael was still gone. I didn't go back to the restaurants right away. I couldn't face the place where Jake and Amanda had stood, planning, calculating, waiting for my brother to die. I stayed at my apartment in Dorchester, the same place I'd lived for 20 years. I read Michael's old letters. I looked at photographs. I let myself grieve. And then one morning in April, I woke up knowing what I had to do. I called Catherine O'Brien. I want to restructure the trust. What did you have in mind? The restaurants stay in the family trust, but I want to add something new. A culinary scholarship fund for kids from South Boston, from Dorchester, from the neighborhoods where Michael and I grew up. Kids who dream of becoming chefs but can't afford culinary school. Catherine was quiet for a moment. That's beautiful, Tom. Michael would have loved that. I'm calling it the Michael Brennan Memorial Scholarship. Every year, we'll send 5 students to culinary school. Full tuition, living expenses, everything. And when they graduate, they'll have the option to work at our restaurants if they want. Learn the business from the ground up, the way Michael and I did. What about the real estate? Those buildings are worth millions. The Newbury Street location becomes a non-profit teaching restaurant. Students work there as part of their training. We keep the quality high, keep my mother's recipes alive, but make it about education instead of profit. The other locations, we keep running them, but the profits go into the scholarship fund and a new foundation I want to create. What kind of foundation? Alzheimer's research. Michael spent 3 years disappearing piece by piece. I watched him forget how to cook the foods he'd made for 30 years. I watched him forget my name. No family should have to go through that. Catherine helped me set everything up. The Michael Brennan Memorial Scholarship sent its first 5 students to the Culinary Institute of America that fall. The Brennan Family Foundation donated $2 million to Alzheimer's research. And Brennan's on Newbury Street became a teaching restaurant where students learned not just how to cook, but how to run a business with integrity. My mother, Agnes, now 92 and still sharp despite her age, came to the opening of the teaching restaurant. She stood in the kitchen she'd inspired, watching young chefs prepare her tomato sauce recipe, and she cried. Michael would be so proud, she said, squeezing my hand. I'd like to think so, Ma. I'd like to think so. Jake sends letters from prison sometimes. They sit unopened in a box in my closet. I'm not ready to read them. Maybe I never will be. Some betrayals go too deep for forgiveness. But every year, when I watch 5 new students receive their Brennan scholarships, when I see them standing in our kitchen learning my mother's recipes, when I hear them talk about their dreams, their futures, I feel like Michael is there, like he's standing next to me, grinning with tomato sauce on his apron, proud of what we built together. This is what I've learned. Greed is loud and clumsy. It makes mistakes. It leaves evidence. It underestimates the people it tries to destroy. But love, real love for family and community, and the things you build together, that's quiet. That's patient. That's stronger than any amount of money or ambition. Jake thought he was stealing restaurants. He didn't understand that what Michael and I built couldn't be stolen. It wasn't in the real estate or the bank accounts. It was in the recipes passed down from our mother, in the employees who'd worked with us for decades, in every meal we'd served with pride, in every customer who'd become family. You can forge signatures. You can poison someone. You can try to steal their legacy, but you can't destroy what they built if it was built on something real. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever watched someone you loved disappear, either through illness or betrayal? Have you ever had to fight for their memory against people who only saw dollar signs? Let me know your story in the comments below. Your stories remind me that I'm not alone in this. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Gilded Vengeance, because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's making sure that the people who tried to destroy you fail so completely that their names are forgotten while the person they hurt is remembered forever.